streaking naked through town was gonna get him killed in a hurry.
This is I Don't Even Own a Television, and today we're talking Pines.
There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all, 'cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
All right, welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bad books. And this is a very special episode because today I'd like to introduce you to the new co-host of the program, Mr. Chris Collision. How is it going?
It's going very well. How are you doing?
Excellent. Longtime listeners of the show will recognize the voice from our Necroscope episode, which was well received. And I think after that, we've continued to joke around quite a bit on Twitter, and I've been really looking to bring somebody else into the project for a while, and I couldn't think of a better choice. So I was super stoked that you agreed to do this, and I think it's going to make for a much more excellent addition to an already excellent show. So thanks again, and
thank you, and God, no pressure, right?
Yeah, seriously. Welcome to the best podcast in the world. Don't ruin it.
Hi, I'm Chris Collision, world's greatest podcaster.
But seriously, so today we decided we would kick things off by just having a conversation with the two of us about a book entitled Pines, just Pines.
Just Pines.
It's the first book in the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch, which is a weird action-y sort of name. And it's about to be made into a Fox television series, which will inevitably be canceled after one season.
Although I had no idea about any of this existing until you suggested I read it. Not only is it a Fox television series with Matt Dillon, but there's some fairly heavy hitters in there. There's Carla Gugino's cast in it. I think the Toby Smith or Toby Huss or whatever his name is from what is it? Raiders of the Lost Ark is in it as a bad guy. I mean,
that is Toby Smith, also from Barbarian Sound Studio, which is a favorite of mine, but that's a different story.
So this is not only going to be a giant failure, it's going to be a fairly high-profile giant failure.
Oh, well, do you happen to know who is the executive producer of the show as well as the director of the pilot?
Hitler?
M. Night Shyamalan, which
Jesus Christ.
will make a lot of sense as we begin to describe this book. I couldn't think of a more accurate choice because like most of Shyamalan's movies, this book is a plot twist delivery mechanism. And so that being said, be forewarned, this is going to contain a bunch of spoilers. I have a feeling the show is going to try to play this out as a mystery over the course of an entire season. So if you're planning on watching a bad show on Fox and being surprised by it, just be forewarned, we're going to fuck it up for you.
Badly. Okay, so should we just sort of jump into talking about the ostensible plot of this sucker?
Yeah, I think so. But once again, warning, people at home, spoilers for the worst possible thing.
Spoilers ahead.
But seriously, don't worry about it. That's my spoiler. It doesn't matter.
Here's the big spoiler. Don't read this book. Don't watch the show.
Yeah. Anyway, though, let's summarize here. I'm going to hand things off to you because you've read this more recently than I have. I actually read it a while ago for pleasure. I'm making air quotes with my mind. But yeah, let's get into it.
So was Mr. Blake Crouch. All right, so Pines begins with a man named Ethan Burke waking up. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who he is. And this happens several times. So he wakes up sort of in a field by the side of the road, and he's got injuries, and so he wanders around a small, seemingly idyllic town. I wonder if it will prove to be idyllic, however. Suspense goes here. So he's wandering around. He's trying to find the mystery of this town. He's trying to find the mystery of how he came to be there. Eventually, he realizes that he was a Secret Service agent doing an investigation into a small Idaho town called Wayward Pines. What I've just described happens maybe 4 consecutive times over the first half of the book. He'll get somewhere, he'll get knocked out, he'll wake up, he'll go through the process again. Some of the details will change. Maybe he'll learn one new thing. That's it. That's the first half of the book. Eventually, he realizes that one of his co-Secret Service agents was a woman he had had an affair with. Cut to his wife pining for him back in Seattle, where he's from. She knows he's cheated on her, but she's just so in love with him because he's so great. And this goes on for, I don't know, 600-700 pages of her moping and being drunk at a party because she finally decides that she and her son are gonna.
They're going to accept that he's dead and move on.
He's going to accept it. Yeah, exactly. They're going to accept he's dead and they're going to move on. At which point the careful reader, i.e. the non-collision reader, will start to realize there's some weird stuff going on with time here because the events of the book from Ethan Burke's perspective seem to be maybe 2-3 days.
It's worth mentioning he has convenient narrative amnesia every time he wakes up in one of these situations. So he can't remember exactly what happened before he was in this car crash.
Right.
And he's piecing it together on 4 separate occasions in essentially the same way every time.
Right. So he's experiencing this in, a couple days' time. Her perspective is he's been gone for some years. So, maybe that's interesting. Anyway, this keeps happening. Eventually, he decides he has to escape the town because things are just too creepy. We're told repeatedly that things are just too creepy.
Yeah.
Nothing particularly creepy is really going on.
Except the fact that the town is surrounded by a giant electrified fence and no one's allowed to leave.
Okay, so that's creepy. Fair enough. He does try to steal a car and drive out of town, and it goes through some sort of space loop, so that doesn't work. And then he starts walking out of town, and that doesn't really work. There's about 11 chase scenes, which work just as well on paper as they do in your favorite movie.
It's true.
People die, and eventually, finally, he escapes the town and finds hideous monsters that are some kind of, I don't know, I kept picturing some kind of sloth ape hybrid with like Wolverine claws.
Yeah, maybe it says something about me more than the book, but I kept picturing like Resident Evil monstrosities.
Well, there's that's not an accident. There's some Resident Evil baked in, I think. So he encountered, there's hideous monsters outside the town. What? And eventually there's a big bad guy who is revealed to have been a character you've already met.
Surprise.
Because it's that kind of book.
It is.
Who then gives about a 20-page core dump exposition, like soliloquy.
Oh, it's better than that. In addition to him giving the core dump exposition, mid-exposition, he has an expository flashback.
That is true.
So they interrupt his spoken exposition to deliver a bunch of exposition about the character that's delivering the exposition. It's fucking recursive. It's amazing.
It's all the fun of your favorite David Foster Wallace footnote, but with really shitty prose and a kind of dumb story. And so the backstory is roughly this. Spoilers are about to happen.
Yeah, get ready. We're going to blow the lid off this joint.
Right. An evil genius billionaire, like happens all the time, is also the world's greatest scientist. And he has discovered that there's something wrong in human DNA and that humans are about to mutate big time, and probably not in a way that he thinks is good. So what he does is what any of us would naturally do. He invents suspended animation and walls off a tiny town in Idaho and starts suspendedly animating people to unfreeze in this place in Idaho in the future after everything's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So
well, that's what I do.
What could go wrong with this plan?
Yeah. Not with my tax dollars, buddy. That's all I'm saying.
This is all privately funded.
Oh, yeah. Actually, they do make a point of getting into that.
Yeah, no government. So that explains why the town is so creepy, because it's actually a fake town, hundreds or thousands of years in the future. The rest of the world is completely fallen and turned over to these resident evil sloth monkey clawed things.
Yes.
And that's more or less where the book ends, where your main character has had everything exposited to him. The big bad guy has said, So all you've done is try to run away and solve mysteries, and this makes me trust you and want to make you my number one right-hand man henchman. Like a billionaire genius would do.
Definitely.
And it ends with Ethan accepting and becoming the sheriff of Wayward Pines and to keep order.
Yes, and it should be mentioned this is the first part of a trilogy. For some reason, I read the second two parts of this as well. They were available for free, and it was during a very unemployed portion of my life. So I read all three of them. Chris has only read one, so hopefully he'll be able to keep me on track here if I start getting too ahead of myself. I don't want to spoil things that weren't revealed in the first book of the series, Pines. The second one is called Wayward, which seems just totally fucking wrong to me. But yeah, and the third one is not called Wayward Pines, which is a disappointment.
That's just stupid. I mean, number one, it should have been called Pines. The second should have been called Wayward Pines. The third should have been called either Hello Wayward Pines or just, Blake Crouch 3. I think that
The Legend of Curly's Gold.
Yeah, exactly. Or, more things should be named according to like Led Zeppelin album title conventions.
Ooh, it could have been Pines with a 3 for the E.
Oh my God, we're gonna make dozens of dollars on this.
Fox, get at me. Ooh, I just dumped beer on the floor. We're off to a rollicking start here on I Don't Even Own a Television. But yeah, so good description of the book. The one thing that I think we forgot to mention is the weird kind of purge type scenario.
It's very, so I did not mention that. So I gestured at the fact that there's a million chase scenes in the book. Most of them just involve Ethan Burke running away from things. And one of the things that he runs away from is a sexy nurse. We'll get to that later. One of the things he runs away from are scary monsters. We talked about that. But one of the things he runs away from is the town going totally the lottery on him.
Yeah.
Everything gets extremely Shirley Jackson. The helpful bartender who kind of adopted him, helpful, sexy bartender.
Yeah.
I should say.
I'm noticing a running theme here with the female characters.
Yes, they're all either comma sexy or comma totally evil, and sometimes comma totally both.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Nurse Pam, hubba hubba, but yeah, we'll get to that more in a second.
Right. So the town goes totally Shirley Jackson on the helpful bartender Beverly, who has kind of taken him in and helped him and given him some helpful exposition. And it's this weirdly described scene where everybody in the town is in what are supposed to be outlandish costumes. So, for example, one woman is wearing a black bikini and black wings and high heels. And
Burning Man.
Burning Man or Love Fest here in SF or whatever. So it doesn't sound too terribly odd. There's one guy who's described as wearing a sport coat and no pants.
That Burning Man.
So maybe it is just like Blake Crouch saw some pictures from Burning Man.
It does sound pretty horrific, I gotta say. There were stories 2 or 3 years ago, I guess, about some old guys that were walking around in Burning Man with dress shirts and no pants that got in a lot of trouble for exposing themselves to women, which I guess when you're already exposed, I don't know how that works. But either way,
right.
They were behaving inappropriately, and it's kind of become a running Burning Man joke. So,
and I don't want to say too much, but I cannot be the only podcast host in the world who shirt cocks in the privacy of his own home.
Nice. Awesome. But basically it is, a situation like the lottery, like you mentioned earlier, where these townspeople are called on their rotary phones. It's made sure to point out many times that the phones in this book are rotary, to the point where if you look in your e-reading device at the section that, will talk about characters and commonly used terms in it, rotary phone pops up as the name of a character accidentally.
May actually be one of the better described characters. Certainly one of the more likable characters.
But yeah, so basically what happens is all the citizens of the town get a call on their rotary phone, and they get a pre-recorded message of the sheriff telling them, tonight you all have to kill so-and-so, and that person, then the hunt is on.
Right.
And then they all go out in the streets and mete out vigilante justice upon the unwitting victim who has to run and try to survive. But they can't leave the town because if they do, the monstrosities await. And yeah, and so that's like, I'd say as far as this book goes, that part is kind of the action climax, I think, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the rest of it is more sort of survival-y stuff and running away stuff or failed investigation stuff. And it goes on a long-ass time.
It does. It's a really, really long segment, and a lot of it, the length of it, isn't necessarily describing the crazy stuff that's going on. It's this almost procedural account of how the protagonist avoids this angry crowd.
One thing I definitely want to say about this book, and you know, so I think we've given a pretty fair taste of what the plot is, and
I think
how
that's
it goes. The experience of reading it really feels like a almost real-time experience. Like everything is described, nothing is left out. If he goes to a hotel, you hear about his trip through the lobby. You hear about his elevator experience.
Yeah.
You hear about him walking down the hallway. You hear about him opening the door. You hear about him looking around the hotel room.
Yeah, like the lottery sequence that, you know, we just described. Like, I'd say a good, I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, so I'll say a good 20 pages. I think that's being conservative here. Is literally a turn-by-turn account of, you know, which houses he duck around the corner of to avoid people.
Yep.
His reasoning behind ducking behind a particular corner, because let's not forget, he's a highly trained government agent.
Who used to be a shit-hot helicopter pilot.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's 20 pages of, you know, he knew that when he was flanking, you know, his enemy, he needed to be moving diagonally to them and not, you know, horizontally. So he ducked behind this building and then peeked out behind the next building before running catty corner to the house across the street. And this just goes on and on and on.
And none of it is taking place in a town that's really been described. Like, you know that there's a street called Main Street.
Yeah.
And you know that there's some numbered streets, but you don't know anything about the geography or layout of the town. It's like watching a movie that doesn't show you the sort of warehouse where the big gunfight is going to take place, and you're just completely lost. You're like, there's a guy standing there. I don't know where he is.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's shooting at. It's turn by turn directions of a place you can't see.
Yeah, exactly.
At all.
Which I think in a lot of ways kind of contributes to what we were talking about before we started recording here, in that there's a really video gamey element to the narrative here, I think, for sure.
Reading the book is exactly, to me, like watching somebody play a video game, and not a particularly well-written video game either. It's somebody waking up, it's somebody poking around, and then there's this like blackout, which is sort of like a video game death, and then the whole thing starts again.
Exactly.
The other thing that's super duper video gamey is there's a lot of chase scenes, and at least, I don't know, 3 of those chase scenes take place in hallways. And there's a long hallway running, and then there's try a bunch of doors, and then there's one finally opens and you hide in that room, or the character hides in that room.
Yeah.
That happens in video games because that's an easy thing to develop in a video game.
Yeah.
That doesn't need actually to happen in a book.
Yeah, you don't need to show them like trying every door to generate suspense and every single time. And
you don't need to do that. And, you know, since you don't have to animate it, you don't have to constrain it, so it doesn't have to take place in a small linear environment like a hallway.
That's very true. And yeah, the hospital in particular in this is used very, very like obviously because it's a natural example of one of those environments.
Right.
Where there's a hallway and a police station that both factor into heavily into the kind of the action scenes, and both of them are exactly what you just described, where it's like, oh, here's a long hallway with a bunch of doors. Oh shit, most of them are locked.
Right. And so it happens in the hallway. It happens in the hospital. It happens in the police station. It happens at the big bad evil complex. I don't know what you would call it, but
it's the Wizard of Oz area, basically. It's where the man behind the curtain lives, because you discover this Wayward Pines complex is surrounded by mountains, and one of the mountains is hollowed out and contains a compound of the people who are kind of engineering this.
Right. And you know, he stumbles into the suspended animation wing. He stumbles through the warehouse wing that has lots of cars like warehouses have in them.
Of course, yeah.
Lots of, stored food and everything. It's very, very, very video gamey. We'll get to this. The author claims very explicitly certain influences, but
I disagree. I disagree with this man about his influences.
Agreed.
We'll get into this more later. But yeah, I call bullshit on his stated influence.
Yeah, his main influences appear to be Resident Evil and maybe Silent Hill or something.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's
It's bad.
it's quite bad. So this is a ridiculously non-comprehensive list, but as I was reading it, if you'd been in the other room, listener, you would have heard quite a lot of heavy sighings and the occasional "Are you fucking kidding me?" Because this book has the greatest proportion of 2-word paragraphs I have ever seen in any book. And so I didn't keep a seriously comprehensive list by any stretch, but someday I am going to dump the e-reader version of this into a text editor and just sort it by line length. And it's going to read about the same.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, you're so right. I didn't even notice reading it, but they were all like, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but you probably have examples.
I have a couple of examples.
Yeah. We'll get into these examples. So before we do that, I'll just create one here from the grassroots. Jay was about to deliver a lot of pointless exposition. He didn't. Okay.
So here's a sequence of 2-word paragraphs, 4 consecutive 2-word paragraphs that occur midway through the book.
I remember this now. That's awesome.
I found this looking for something else. No sound, no movement, eerily still. He descended. So I think maybe you're getting a sense of why this book feels like it's playing out in real time. The other thing...
It's like stage directions almost.
It is. But if you flip to any page of this book, I bet you are not more than 1 page away from a 2-word paragraph. And then here's a quick list of 1-word paragraphs that I generated on the way over because I just got curious to see if there was anything shorter than a 2-word paragraph. Spoiler, there is. Darker. Shit. Beverly, imploring, desperation, empty, indifferent, locked, nothing.
Lamentations. Those aren't actually in there. But
I don't know that for a fact.
That's true, they could be.
They could very, very easily be. So that's just, I think that really speaks to the overall laziness and kind of slapdash nature of just the writing of this book. It's just really phoned in. It's really just lazy.
So speaking of lazy, I think it's probably a good time for us to take a little break. So we're going to do that, and then we will come back and we'll dig a little bit deeper here into the characters of, I almost said Wayward Pines, but of Pines.
Of Pines from the Wayward Pines trilogy. Coming soon on Fox.
Yes, so stick around for the show, not the TV show. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. I am J.W. Friedman.
And I am Chris Collision.
And we're talking about Pines of the Wayward variety.
God, are we in the Pines?
We are. Deep. This book is by Blake Crouch, also a deep crouch. He's lifted mad weight in his squats, I'm sure, judging by the tone of this book.
Blasting his quads.
Exactly. This book is like, we didn't even really talking about this, but I just want to say, like, this has reminded me, this book is really macho in a really retrograde kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of, like, really 80s, like, Sly Stallone kind of vibes you get from the protagonist, for sure.
I think we're about 4 pages in when he stops to check himself out in the mirror, and, like, everything to this point has been how shitty he feels. He's just gotten beat up or in a car wreck or something. He's determining. But he's looking in the mirror, and he's like, I must lift weights based on the way my suit jacket fits and the way the Oxford is tight across my chest.
Totally true.
Like one word later, or like one paragraph later, he's like, I imagine I cut quite a figure.
Yeah. He's like, well, I don't remember much about myself, but I know I'm hot as fuck.
Exactly. This black suit makes me look kill awesome.
So yeah, I guess it's probably a good time here to kind of delve more into our characters, including our mega yoked protagonist, Ethan Burke, who also has an incredibly manly name, I gotta say, and who strangely enough will be played by Matt Dillon in the television show.
It's half manly because I just don't buy Ethan as that intimidating. I don't think I could be intimidated by a man named Ethan.
I don't know. But I watched Lost a lot, and there was a really creepy Ethan in Lost.
So that's a fair point. But I do flash back to that.
P.S. Tune in for the literary opinions of a man who watched Lost a lot. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah, Ethan.
Golden age of television.
Ethan Burke, FBI man, stranded, doesn't know what to do. Maybe perhaps one man charged with peeling back the veil of the white picket fence existence of Wayward Pines and revealing the dark heart that pulses beneath.
I think that he is literally the only man for the job because he's the only guy in the book.
That's true.
Yeah. The thing that you just said, though, is almost word for word in this book. Like,
yes.
He's just sort of wandering around and he thinks to himself, I almost want to look it up, but it's just too bad to look up. He's like, my experience, the evil lurked everywhere with darkness only a millimeter deep. And if you got to the bone, pitch black. Something like that.
Let me tell you, you are lucky because that is one of the popular highlighted segments of this in my e-reader.
Oh, shit, you're right.
And so if I find it here in a second. Here it was. Yes, in chapter 2, this is actually 28 pages into the book here. In case you're worried they might be playing things close to the chest. Nope. The shit comes out like with fucking a double barrel of serious fucking metaphorical context. And it says, perfection was a surface thing. The epidermis. Cut a few layers deep, you begin to see some darker shades. Cut to the bone, pitch black. So,
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I was saying, like, actually one of the notes I wrote about this is that this is amazing and that, like, it encapsulates two of the most, like, poorly regarded, frequently mocked, like, fiction tropes, like television tropes especially, in one book, where it's both kind of, you know, the dark reality behind the white picket fence, and then also really clumsily executed, like, kind of time travel, twisty intrigue.
Right.
And it's like either one of those on its own, like, would have been bad, but the fact that it comes at you with both of them is pretty rough.
And neither of them is at all well handled. Fine, there's a spooky Shirley Jackson moment, but it kind of comes out of nowhere. And again, you're just told over and over again what a creepy town this is, but you're being told this from the point of view of a guy who doesn't have a wallet, doesn't have a phone, doesn't really know anything, and looks like hell because his face is constantly bleeding and he's got like a bad headache all the time. So the book sort of could have been interesting if it followed through on this kind of, you know, deeply unreliable narrator, deeply unreliable protagonist thing.
Yeah.
But no, it turns out he is exactly as big a hero as you think he is. He is this magical Secret Service guy, ex-Navy pilot or whatever he was, helicopter pilot.
Just a stand-up, fighting for freedom type guy.
Exactly.
With no flaws at all.
Well, no, I mean, he's got flaws, but they're really spectacularly pointless flaws.
Yeah.
Like, he was, oh my God, one huge subplot that we didn't mention because it literally doesn't matter. He was captured in Iraq and tortured brutally.
Yeah, I forgot about this.
And then when he's finally rescued, the extraction team gives him a moment alone with his torturer and he just shoots him in the face.
Yeah, I forgot about that actually. So yeah, he's flawed.
He's
but
flawed, yeah.
he's flawed in a incredibly predictable Hollywood kind of way where you write him a pass for it.
Yeah, he's flawed.
You know?
He's flawed in like the Lethal Weapon way, where I think the idea is it's supposed to make him even more charming.
Yeah. Well, I hate to go totally off the rails here, but I do just want to mention this briefly.
let's do.
Because I saw a commercial last night for a new television series. I guess it's going to be on USA. I forget the name of it. And in it, there's a character. It's from one of the creators of Burn Notice, so you know what to expect. And in it, there's a character who witnesses a child being shot in a drive-by. He's trying to help the kid and save him while the kid's dad is freaking out. The dad is like, holy shit, they're coming back, and drops a pistol and runs away. And so the protagonist of the show stands up with the pistol and is like aiming at the car with these gangsters who are presumably coming back to finish this kid off. And then the next cut is like, you know, his wife asking him like, so how do you feel? And he's like, I feel different. And it cuts to a bunch of scenes of him like fighting crime and shooting people like that and stuff. And it's just like, it totally resonated with me as like, here is the thing that is the cheesiest, most obvious thing to do if you want to have a damaged character, right? You give him the most predictable way to still be a good guy and commit a horrendous act, and that way you can continue to play it off again and again and again. It's like, oh, well, you know, this dude is doing these messed up things because his origin was he did this really honorable thing that was also morally gray, if that makes sense at all.
So they finally got around to watching Death Wish at USA.
Yes, exactly. It is. You're totally right. I didn't even think about it. It's fucking Death Wish. But yeah, it's that same kind of concept. And like, you know, it just bugs me a lot and how predictable it is when you can see things that are set up like the only reason this exists as a character beat is to have an excuse for something that happens in the story.
Right. And it's this really mechanical connect the dots style. It's like somebody got to the page in the script writing manual that said, your character should have a seminal event in their history that explains otherwise strange or puzzling aspects of their behavior.
Yeah.
And since, you know, we're writing for TV, it can't be, you know, saw nature's beauty and is sometimes overwhelmed by how wonderful life can be. No, it's got to be an act of savage brutality.
I didn't want to interrupt here because you could have been talking about my recollection of this commercial, but I just realized you said because we're writing for TV.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume you were accidentally referring to this book because this book is a television screenplay.
Well, yeah, a lot of both.
Yeah. and it's interesting. Once again, we're going to get into this later. And so I'm teasing it again. But you know, the influences that he mentions for this, none of them are literary. The influences for this book are television series.
Right.
And I think that comes through a lot in the writing. It's not surprising to me at all that this is going to be a TV show because it's written like one already.
And I think that does explain some of why it's so unsatisfying, especially in the early going, where it keeps kind of rebooting itself and it keeps restarting. That can kind of work in TV because it gives you this weird
syndication.
Well, I mean, in syndication or in
Quantum Leap
on TV or in a movie where, you know, it does give you this kind of dissociated feel because there's also the cues that something is the same. It's the same actor playing the part, so you've got that anchor there, right? But here it's just it's much less effective because the tool being used is not particularly appropriate for the medium.
Exactly.
He said, stroking his high horse happily.
I'd like to take this moment to welcome a special guest of the podcast, my dog Heston, who is barking loudly from the other room. You may hear him from time to time.
What up, dog?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for this dog who won't stop barking. All right.
He's a handsome fellow, and I assume that he's barking at evil.
Yes. Whoa. That was good timing, though. He may not stop, so... All right. I'm going to just hit pause. All right. Sorry about that. As we were just discussing, this book suffers from a problem that I see again and again lately in a lot of things that I've been reading, and not just necessarily things for this podcast. I think it's a pretty common situation lately, which is to have this kind of magical protagonist who has this set of generally they're government skills, like an FBI guy or a military guy or something. But sometimes he's just, an experienced survivalist or whatever, or some nonsense like that. But I feel like when people are writing these books that are kind of action heavy lately, there's this real kind of tendency to go to the well of having this guy, highly trained government operative of some variety. And it really frustrates me in a lot of ways because in this book, I think it's really only used as kind of a get out of jail free card.
Yep.
Anytime that there needs to be something done that, like, say, a character with a normal background wouldn't have been immediately familiar with. And
like, say, flying a helicopter in the climax.
Exactly. And it drives me crazy for a lot of reasons, and not just because it's lazy writing, which it totally is, but I think that in a lot of situations it really wastes a potential of, like having an emotional moment or having an emotional character beat where you could, show the experience of someone like overcoming their lack of knowledge or learning to do something and the progression that they go and develop this character. But instead, there's kind of this tendency to have these guys start out as just this vaguely defined Superman who can solve any problem when it comes to him just because they can.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of points in this book, like towards the end, he's involved in some mountaineering, where he has to escape from some of these creatures.
Yeah, and he just free climbs his ass off.
Exactly. And he's amazing at it, and he gets everything right the first time, and it's very great. And, whereas like previously 20 pages was spent talking about him running away from people because he has this, military experience, this 20-page event of him ducking from corner to corner is told to you procedurally. It's like you could have taken those 20 pages and like actually used it to develop this character of like overcoming and learning how to fucking climb and learning how to get away from these guys on the fly, and been like, hey, this character has gone somewhere, he's had a journey. And instead it's just like magical FBI man Ethan Burke already knew how to do everything in the fucking world. And like,
it makes it extremely difficult to give a shit about. Because he is just very, very good at more or less everything. He's not very good at piecing the mystery together.
Well, he's kind of dumb.
Well, there's that. And it's pretty clear that his problem piecing the mystery together is a problem with the way the mystery was put together.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's just extremely shoddily thought through. But he is sort of overpowered and underpowered at the same time, because all this time you're left with these long descriptions of his concussions or his injuries his whatever, and then he goes out and beats up 7 men and runs for an hour and a half and everything's fine.
But he talks about how it hurt the entire time.
It hurt the entire time.
Just to pad things out for an extra few paragraphs.
And then just one thing that, really stuck in my craw, similar to what stuck in your craw about sort of how this plays in with a bunch of other books. There's this moment where he has to sleep in Cave Convenient.
Oh, God.
Where he's on the run, and he's very, very cold. So what he does is he takes all his clothes off and lies on the ground and, like, drapes his clothes over himself and complains that he's even colder, which is exactly right. I don't know if you've ever had to sleep outside unexpectedly. I don't know if you've ever seen a homeless person. But in general, you don't take all your clothes off, let the ground suck heat from your naked body, and cover only the top of yourself.
Yeah.
Here's a I don't even own a television pro tip.
Just tune in for our TED Talk about survival tactics and life hacks.
If you're very, very cold, I recommend you don't take your clothes off.
Keep your clothes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I know about survival. Well, keep your clothes on. It's important.
Find a pocket knife if you can. But it's the same thing, because so you've got this character who's supposedly very expert at everything, and then he does this completely ludicrous thing that just reveals the limitations of the author's knowledge.
Yeah, well, he's an expert in everything the author thought was important enough to research, like helicopters.
Right. And having a sexy affair with a coworker.
That's true. Oh man, and boy does that ever come back in the following 2 books, but we can't talk about that yet.
Thank fucking God.
Let's just say that in Wayward Pines, some people are not as dead as they seem.
What?
Holy crap. Man, M. Night Shyamalan is having a field day with this as we speak. He's I guarantee you he's like a kid in a candy shop with this screenplay. Like, this is The Village, but like writ large.
that particular chunk did not click with me until you said it earlier, because I had no idea M. Night was heading this up for TV.
He's the executive producer. I know he's directing the pilot. I have a
Right.
feeling he'll be directing quite a few more episodes because it seems like he has a very hands-on role in the show for sure.
Which means he will inevitably be a character in the show, possibly a character in the show who explains
I was just going to say, who's the most important person in this book? Because that's where old M will pop up for sure. Anyway.
So that is an entire set of influences that are, I think, very clear, but that weren't clear to me. And that's one of the biggest failings of the book, where this guy claims 8 or 10, let's just say, influences, but none of them actually make their way into the result.
Yeah.
Maybe, do we want to talk about that now? Or should
Yeah,
we break
let's just go ahead here. And that I would say that the one thing that we've been kind of dancing around, and just before we blow this, I just want the audience to stop and consider what we've told you about the story so far and ask you to think, and I mean, we've even said television. So like, what would pop into your mind as being the obvious influence for this? And the answer is not going to be what you think.
That's right. It's Northern Exposure.
Exactly. It turns out this whole book is about 30-something. No, it's Twin Peaks, which, like, I could totally...
What?
Yeah, I know. I could totally see, like, yeah, it takes place in the woods, and there's an FBI agent. Beyond that, I think the similarities stop, other than the fact that Twin Peaks traded very heavily in kind of mystery and the unknown. And I think that Blake Crouch thinks he's doing that.
Right.
But very much like what you mentioned earlier is I think there's a huge difference between an influence and a favorite.
Right. And the section you read is about the epidermis, peel it back in its pure darkness beneath.
Yeah. That's Lynchian.
Yeah, that it is Lynchian. And that comes up in the afterword, which we both read, which is basically Blake Crouch explains his book to you.
Yeah, and we should mention just briefly, that's how we know, the influences. We're not extrapolating here. This book ends with about a 10-page epilogue, which is essentially a list of the things that influenced his writing of this book.
Right, and 9 of which are Twin Peaks.
Yes.
He thinks he really likes Twin Peaks, and he thinks that Twin Peaks is about the dark heart underneath this seemingly idyllic town, which, number one, I'm not incredibly convinced that's what Twin Peaks is about.
I think there was a little more to it than that, to be totally honest.
There's that, and the dark heart that was legitimately in Twin Peaks was not this tired, badly done science fiction trope of a billionaire trying to semi-benevolently, fascistically save the world by remaking it in an image he found congenial.
Yeah, this guy really likes Twin Peaks if Twin Peaks would have turned out to be an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Exactly. If Twin Peaks had turned out to be not The Village.
Yeah, or like Dark City or something. Like if at the end of Twin Peaks it turned out that Laura Palmer was actually a robot and that the whole city existed as a figment of the people's imagination that was brought on by some sort of chemical matrix indoctrination. Like that's what this book is.
Exactly. And the thing that there's constant little things that pop up. Like I was deeply annoyed because 6 or 8 pages in, there's this page and a half thing where Ethan is wandering around and he sees a coffee shop and he's like, oh my God, I have a new chunk of my identity. I'm a person who loves coffee.
And cherry pie.
He actually doesn't say that, but thank God. But he loves coffee and it's very important to him. It says like on the page, liking coffee is an important part of who I am. Quick trivia question. Does he so much as drink 1 cup of coffee in this book?
I would say yes.
I looked. He does not.
But it's important to him.
It's very important. And so that had annoyed me just as this dumb, gratuitous thing. And I didn't realize till like a week after I was done with the book, oh, holy shit, that's supposed to be an Agent Cooper.
A damn fine cup of coffee.
Reference, right? And the whole book is filled with gestures like these at his favorite things. And he takes these gestures like, oh, this guy's going to say he likes coffee. He he believes that gesture constitutes him working with an influence.
Yeah, or like doing an homage, but it very like, I hate to, be regressive and refer to other episodes of the show, but it's kind of that Ready Player One-ness
Yes.
where it thinks that like making a reference to something means working it into the narrative, and that's not true at all, and it really jumps out. It's none of the characters break the fourth wall, but like
Right.
moments like that feel so meta that it really takes you out of any sort of immersion you may have previously had, which is probably none.
Exactly. It's endemic to the whole book. Like the guy thinks he has these influences and he thinks he has these ideas, but everything is this incredibly surfacey, uninvolved and uninvolving version of it.
Well, off mic, I think we kind of touched on something when we were talking about this, and you had brought up, in a musical context, people saying, naming these really off the wall influences that don't sound anything like the music they're making.
Right.
And you had brought up the point that there's a difference between an influence and a favorite band.
Right.
And I feel like that really applies here. Like, I don't doubt that Blake Crouch is a gigantic Twin Peaks fan, but I feel like calling Twin Peaks an influence on this is incredibly presumptuous and like really kind of puts this book in a lexicon that it has no place, like even remotely like thinking about being in.
Yeah.
I don't know. I sound really like a jerk, and I don't mean to be like that overly negative, but the Twin Peaks, it ain't. So, and I mean, Twin Peaks, I think it's pretty routinely acknowledged now, had a lot of problems. Like it's wonderful, groundbreaking television with a lot of problems. This doesn't have the wonderful and groundbreaking element to back up the problems that it has,
Right. Yeah. I don't remember Kyle MacLachlan ever like yelling, "Get to the chopper."
Yeah, and oh man, yeah. There's some straight up like macho action movie moments towards the later part of this book. We didn't even talk about Nurse Pam yet.
Oh God. Yeah. No, we've got to talk a little bit about Nurse Pam, and we've got to talk a lot about Ethan as character.
Yeah.
So let's start with Nurse Pam.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I don't remember if this was on mic or not, but Nurse Pam has no last name.
Right.
She's mentioned hundreds of times in this book, but is not characterized even to the extent where she has a surname. She exists as Pam or Nurse Pam every single time she's mentioned in this book. She's a sexy, zoftig woman who is, like the town nurse for a doctor who is kind of a non-character. And then gradually you discover she has more and more sinister involvement with the conspiracy that's going on.
Right.
And she kicks ass.
Yeah, so she literally first appears at, I think, the second iteration of the beginning of the book, where Ethan wakes up, no idea who he is or where he is.
It's like Groundhog Day, but bad.
Or as I would say, Groundhog Day and also bad like Groundhog Day was bad.
Whoa.
I'm the one guy on the internet who...
Oh, man. You're off to a rollicking start on your first episode. I hope your email account is primed. Hey, guys, that was not Jay Friedman. That was Chris Collision.
This is Chris Collision. Come at me, bros.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to get that clear.
That movie blows. Yeah, so she literally appears and is described as wearing a, out of place, retro, sexy nurse's outfit. Like they like you said, they kind of break the fourth wall to be like, what? I didn't even know nurses still dressed like this.
Like totally like the paper hat and all that stuff.
Yeah,
stockings and whatnot.
It's very mediocre 70s porn level description.
There's a lot of like bow chicka wow wow in it for sure.
Yeah, she's super flirtatious. It's just very dumb. And then
also, once again, sorry, just to kind of get back to this heavily influenced TV thing, when she's described physically, as all female characters in this book are done obsessively, she's pretty much exactly like what's her name, Joan from Mad Men. Like they pretty much just described that character, and that made me laugh.
Right.
Christina Hendricks. It's hilarious, like right down to like the color of her hair, like her proportions, which are described in great detail. It was just very funny to me, especially since she's kind of put into this very retro role where I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found that entertaining.
And then a few characters. No, a few chapters later, it turns out that she's sort of the number 2 hench person to the big bad. And if I remember right, I'm kind of half looking for it, but I kind of don't want to find it. There's a big chase scene that results in Ethan having to beat her up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's totally that. And of course, there's a lot of talk about how he's remorseful about having to fight a woman, because otherwise you might forget that Ethan is perfect.
Yeah, among the most distasteful moments of a quite distasteful book to me.
Yeah.
So there's that female character who's obviously just a set of sort of traditional genre tropes. She's a sexy nurse, but then she's an evil sexy nurse.
She's the Baroness from G.I. Joe, basically. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's extremely fair.
Yeah.
So there's her. Who else do we have? Oh, there's Teresa.
Yes, Teresa.
That's Ethan's wife, who's back at home, keeping those home fires burning, and just could not love him more, could not be more devoted to him, even as she's flashing back to the darkest moments of their marriage when he was running around on her with a coworker. She still is just sort of sighing and in love with him.
Yeah, and Beverly, the bartender, who also is kind of doe-eyed over Ethan and helps him evade from the law when he first starts to realize something sinister is going on in town. And,
Very much so.
She pretty much exists to, tell him he's wonderful, and then becomes the subject of the lottery hunt later on.
Yeah, does the woman who bails him out of all his troubles live to the end of the book?
Oh, of course not.
Right. Spoiler. So let's take one quick step back. We've just described three ladies, and it may seem odd that we've described all three in terms of their relation to and use to the main character, but this is built into the book. This is not us importing this. Over the first couple chapters, he meets in order the following women: a dreadlocked coffee shop girl who is described as cute.
Yes.
Who's the next? Another cute, but she's a little heavy woman. A mean woman who is helpfully described as fat.
Yep.
And then he finally meets Beverly. And I want to read to you how Beverly is described.
Oh, yes,
because
please.
This is when I would have thrown the book across the wall had it not been an electronic device that I own and don't want to pay money to.
Books aren't as
replace.
throwable as they used to be.
That's a fact. The woman smiled, leaned toward him across the bar. It had been hard to tell in the low light, but in proximity, she was damn good looking.
Awooga!
A few years younger than Ethan, with model cheekbones, short torsoed, and long-legged. Had probably been a stone-cold knockout in her 20s, although 34 or 35, whatever she was now, didn't seem to be treating her too badly.
If I were Ethan, and at this point I didn't know that much about myself, but I could pinpoint a grown woman's age within 2 years, I would probably assume that my previous job was at a carnival, not the FBI.
Or if he is in fact in the FBI, perhaps he's in the female body inspector
Oh my god!
division.
Holy shit! I had that No, I didn't actually. I don't even want to say that as a joke because someone will take it seriously. I never had that T-shirt, but I remember it.
I just want to thank you for teeing that up for me.
Oh, no problem.
But this is just gross. First off, she is 5 years younger than me. I bet she was hot 15 years before that.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even really think about that, but that's a very creepy turn of a phrase for sure.
And it's a rare book where stone cold knockout appears not as character dialogue, but just as narrated prose.
Yeah, I'm like rolling like fucking sixes on all this shit lately between bodacious tatas and stone cold knockouts and stuff. Hopefully the next book on the show will like top it even more and like maybe have a reference to a radical babe,
right?
Perhaps.
Yeah. Her body was ... banging, bro.
Tubular knockers.
Yeah, it's
tubular knockers sound kind of scary. Actually, never mind.
I think I went on tour with them, like, 93.
Also, my favorite song from the Exorcist soundtrack.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Deep cut.
Sorry. I don't know if Tubular Bells was in The Exorcist or not. I'm just making guesses. Anyway, it's probably a good time for us to take a break.
Seems like it.
Yeah. We'll be back with the third segment. We'll do some of the patented things that you love, like dramatic readings and whatnot. And we'll be back after I get those patents in order.
Right on.
Streets on fire, the mob goes wild. 21 guns, box made of pine. Letter from the government, sealed and signed. Delivered Federal Express on your mother's doorsteps. 21 guns, box made of pine. Letter from the government.
Okay. All right. Whoa. Welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. I am J.W. Friedman.
I'm still Chris Collision. I do remember that much.
That is great because we're talking about an amnesia-filled book called, I almost said Wayward Pines. The book is just called Pines by Blake Crouch. It is part 1 of the Wayward Pines trilogy because all books now, it is mandated, must be specified as which part of a series they are in the title.
Yep. And speaking of amnesia, I wish I could forget this book.
Oh, I do and I don't. We're gonna get more into this later. I didn't like it, but I found it entertaining enough to read all 3 of them. So I guess that just says a lot about my patience for things I don't necessarily like, and also perhaps about the variety of free books that are available for e-reading devices, which is not many.
I don't know. I think books are fun to read, even if they're not great.
Yeah, definitely. And I can read them in bed, which is something I can't do with many other forms of entertainment, like playing soccer, which I don't do either.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so we've been discussing this. I think I've identified a gaping plot hole in this book, and I will admit, Chris has read this recently. I read this a couple months ago, so maybe I've forgotten a huge point, so feel free to point it out if I have, right?
Lay it on me. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so the whole point is here in the future in Wayward Pines, we live in a society where everyone's been cryogenically aged. They live inside this electric fence because the rest of the world is all messed up. And a huge part of this seems to be making sure that everyone there is ignorant and they don't know what's going on outside.
Right.
Okay. And so our main character, Ethan, throughout the course of the beginning of this book, wakes up, is an amnesiac, has no idea what's going on with his life, runs around, harasses a bunch of people, is knocked out somehow, wakes up days later and repeats this again.
Right.
So nobody in this town stops to wonder why this same guy keeps disappearing and reappearing and running around asking everyone crazy questions, and it's never really even become a plot point. Like, it's not even like someone's like, hey, there's this crazy fucker in town running around asking questions.
That's interesting because at the very, very end, it is revealed that everybody's got, like, at most 3 freezes in them or something. And this is his third and last chance at integration.
Oh, so are they
Right?
are they saying that maybe it's an entirely different generation? No, it couldn't
No.
be because he runs into his wife. So they're only refreezing him for maybe months at a time.
And people know that people sometimes randomly... That's a very good question.
Because
I
he's
have
met
no
them
idea.
before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so they would know when they're seeing this guy running around the second or third time, they'd be like, oh, that's Ethan, the guy who thinks that he's an FBI man.
Right.
But like throughout the book, no one has any knowledge of him when they meet him on any occasion.
Right.
And they're all just like, no one stops to ask why. And I know I'm being that guy, but it just fucking bugs the heck out of me when an
Right.
entire story is predicated on a twist. And then when you go back and look at the rest of the story, it doesn't make sense.
Right. And there's got to be some, like, way it's pseudo-addressed because of that whole let's go the purge on somebody when the phone rings. Like,
Yeah.
obviously everybody knows there's some kind of dark secret, right?
But I don't think they're supposed to know, you know, the details of what it is.
Right.
But maybe they just think he's a some kind of deviant or something.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it, to be honest, I think it's a hole.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to throw up my hands in victory here regardless because I think both of us can't think of a way to justify it like without going back and referring to the book. At the very least, it wasn't told in a convincing fashion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm you know, I'm a dickhead of a reader. Like, but I am also an extremely easy reader.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about plot holes very much.
No.
And if you, as a writer, address it at all in a way that appears to show me that you've spent more than 5 minutes thinking about it, I'm like, great. Sounds good to me.
You can even address those things by just saying you're not going to address them.
Yep.
And I'll still give you more goodwill than that.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't think of an example in literature, but the movie Looper had a scene that I absolutely love where one character asks another character to go into the details of this time travel stuff. And he says, you're not going to understand it. So let's not bother. And to me, like, maybe that's cheap. But that just made me way more okay with everything else that happened in the movie. Whereas this book just kind of ignores it all.
Yep.
And I feel like if you do have a book where, you know, it is technically a time travel book, it doesn't get into the paradox of alternate timelines and stuff like that. But if you have a book that kind of revolves around this kind of people moving huge distances in time and not knowing what's going on, like, you can't have like a giant gaping hole in everyone's perception of the main character who keeps appearing and disappearing throughout various points of the narrative up until a certain point.
Yeah. No, I think it's totally fair.
Okay, so I'm done being nitpicky, but it really bugged me. So, yeah.
But they're going to know who he is now, damn it.
Yeah.
He's going to be the sheriff.
That's true. Oh, man. Book 2. Well, yeah, I won't get into it, but let me tell you. Things get crazy. Surprise.
Right.
There are many twists a-coming. Actually, not really, though. Like, that's the thing, and I wanted to bring this up earlier when we were talking about influences, was that, like, for all his stated, this is influenced by Twin Peaks stuff, it's not. What this is influenced by is the Twilight Zone, and all of the different shows and narratives that came after it that ape that, whether knowingly or not. And this is just the next in a long line of Twilight Zone-esque narratives. And the thing about the Twilight Zone, the reason why Twilight Zone fucking ruled and why those episodes were so good is they were short.
Yeah, they were a half hour long.
And the twist happened at the end.
Right.
That was the reveal. In this book, the twist happens about halfway through, and guess what? There's 2 more books where you already know everything.
And the other thing is, and this is what kind of separates Twin Peaks from the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone was usually the twist was usually a kind of parodic or allegorical thing.
Yeah.
So it would be, oh, you live in a world where ugliness is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's something that would kind of cause that, like, epiphany moment of, like, oh, that's why this was going on.
But it's broad enough that it does have some kind of resonance and some kind of significance. Twin Peaks is much less specific. There's never really a moment that I remember where somebody is like, gosh, under our plain facade, we sure mask a lot of evil and brutality.
It's not like anyone was like, of course, there's a creepy guy that fucking lives in a weird lodge and there's midgets that talk backwards. It all makes sense now.
Right. But, so it's
I said midgets and I apologize. I meant to say little people. I'm 34 and I'm still learning sometimes, guys, and I mean this sincerely. I apologize. So anyway.
No ableist slurs intended.
No, and I mean that 100% sincerely. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, where Twin Peaks was operating on this much more sort of subconscious, imagistic, just creepo level, and there was no allegory there. And that's something that this book just doesn't understand either part of, because there's no parody here, there's no allegory here, and there's no deep imagistic subconscious significance happening.
I agree 100%, but at the risk of cutting off this incredibly intellectual discussion of the past, I think it's time for us to move on into some pre-planned segments here. Give the people what they want,
let's
quote
do
unquote. It. So let's begin with the most popular, most requested, and most influential segment in podcasting history and broadcasting at large, dramatic readings. Here's a song.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
So, in dramatic readings, we are going to pick a section of this book, and we're going to read it to you very dramatically. I'm glad I described that. I don't think people would have figured it out after. You know?
I mean, if there's anything that song doesn't do, it's prepare you for what's coming next.
That's true, yeah, actually. If you just listen to the words of those songs, and if you can decipher Creed to English, you'll be good to go. Yeah, so would you like to start first, or should I?
I've got it queued up. I can go.
Okay, yeah, why don't you go ahead? So, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Collision and his debut dramatic reading as a host of I Don't Even Own a Television. Let's begin.
Ethan braced for the impact of that piece of information. but he was only vaguely aware that he should be scared shitless. Something he knew, but didn't feel. His mind already roping itself off, sliding into that numb, adrenalized state of rote survival he'd tasted those few times in his life when he'd had the misfortune to lock eyes with death. I just don't know what that sentence means.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that it means or is in reference to, other than Ethan is pretty badass. he's won some staring contests with death.
Yep.
So that's pretty good.
He's locked eyes with death. He's tasted a numb, adrenalized state when locking eyes, and his mind was roping itself off.
Yeah, and what would that taste like? Rope and death, I guess. I don't know. So here's mine. This is an inspirational speech. This is describing the motives of the man who put this whole twisted plan into motion. And so I think there's supposed to be some irony here, but either way, I was going to ask you to pretend that there's patriotic music in the background, but man, I love editing audio, so enjoy. Since the Industrial Revolution, we've treated our world like it was a hotel room and we were rock stars. But we aren't rock stars. In the scheme of evolutionary forces, we are a weak, fragile species. Our genome is corruptible, and we so abuse this planet that we ultimately corrupted that precious DNA blueprint that makes us human. But this man, Pilcher, he saw what was coming. Maybe not specifically, but in broad strokes. Saw that over successive generations, because of the substantial environmental changes we were bringing to bear, there was the potential for tachytelic anagenesis. To put it in terms you might understand, rapid macroevolutionary change. What am I saying? From human to something other in 30 generations. To put it in biblical terms, Pilcher believed the flood was coming, so he decided to build an ark. Are you following me?
Not at all.
No, me neither. I spent, when I was coming up on that, at least 3 sentences just filled with absolute dread about the point where I was going to have to pronounce tachytelic anagenesis, and I think I did a pretty good job.
You nailed it.
Yeah, I don't know if I did it right or not, but it was convincing.
Yeah, it sounded great. I didn't blink at it at all.
All right, so I think it's a good time to move on again here, and we're going to do another segment called Russian Roulette. So here's an exciting song.
Russian roulette, Russian roulette, Russian roulette, not actually Russian.
Hey guys, I'll have you know that song was so exciting that we lost the audio for the part where I describe how the game works. So basically, Russian Roulette, we pick a number at random, a page number, before the segment begins, and then without looking ahead of time, we go to that page and read a piece from it. So let's jump back in here. Chris is about to start. All right.
I'd love to go first, and this will give you a thick, rich taste of the darkness that lurks beneath the suburban facade, or as I once said, facade. Anyway, someone corrected me, not gently.
I like facade. That's pretty awesome.
Okay. She released him, and Ethan stood speechless as Harold lifted a horseshoe out of the sand, took careful aim, and gave it a toss. The horseshoe arced over the grass and ringed the metal stake.
Nice. Ringer.
Huh?
Yeah. I feel like there's something going on here that's deeper than the textual level.
Whoop! Oh, the doorbell's ringing. I think it's a metaphor.
Oh, I thought you were actually saying my doorbell was ringing for a second, and I got really scared and anxious because that's how I react when the doorbell rings, like a healthy person.
Don't we all?
Yeah. Anyway, so for me, I got number 75, which is pretty early in the book. This scene is when Ethan's family thinks he's dead. They've, I guess, after many years of living, not knowing whether he was alive or dead, have come to terms with it. His wife and his son are having a party to celebrate his passing, the acceptance of his passing. And this contains, I'm going to read you 4 paragraphs.
It's called Awake.
Awake,
okay?
Sorry.
It's an important part of my Irish heritage.
Oh, okay. Okay. Ethan Burke. Okay, yeah, I'm glad to see we're staying culturally accurate here. So I'm going to read you 4 paragraphs. Each of these paragraphs contains 4 to 5 words. 3 of them 4, 1 of them 5, which I think we touched on earlier, so hopefully you'll understand. Dramatic music, please. They kept their word. They drank like fish. They told stories about Ethan. They laughed and cried. Star, star, star. That's the paragraph separator. So yeah, that's the end.
I'm so sorry. I overstepped my bounds. That's not called a wake. That's called a fucking rager, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. When I die, I just want to like have all my friends over, and I don't want them to be sad or anything. I just want to have like a huge party where everyone gets drunk. All right, I'll stop.
Fucking Danny can run the barbecue. He loves that shit.
Yeah, I'm glad to see these great ideas enshrined in fiction. Yeah, so anyway, I think we've been running pretty long here, so it's a good time to start tying things up. I think beforehand, just curious if there's anything that you missed that you'd like to backfill here while we still have the opportunity.
TBQH, no. I just don't want to open this goddamn thing again.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Spoiler, don't read the book. Don't read the follow-up books. Don't watch the show.
Yeah. Or maybe, I don't know. I might watch the show just to see what they do for a theme song because I bet it's going to be great.
Ooh, maybe they'll go back and get, I don't know, Antonio Badalamenti or whatever his name was.
I'm hoping it's something like the theme song to Star Trek Enterprise or something like that kind of explains the plot of the entire song, but like in a very like smoky troubadour kind of fashion.
Or the worst theme song of all time, which oddly isn't even Enterprise. That's number 2, but I think Firefly. The worst theme song of all time, and you know.
Are you familiar with the movie Chisholm with John Wayne?
I am not.
That has an intro theme song that literally goes like, Chisholm, John Chisholm. And then it just is like, he lived on the west and he had some land and he fought some Indians and went over here and then he did some shit and it was really strong. And like, it's pretty much like the whole song just, it tells you about what's about to happen. So I'm hoping Wayward Pines is something like, Wayward Pines,
the town with a secret.
I don't know what's happening. All right. So now that you've had your dose of singing, we're going to go ahead and sign off here. But before we do, would you recommend this book to anyone?
Jesus, no. I'm sorry, I would not.
I'd love to say no, but once again, I read this and then I went back to the well for another 2. So
right.
I think it would depend on how bored I felt that person was. Maybe what kind of hole they might be in their life at that point. maybe things are feeling hopeless and you just don't want to leave the house. This is a good book for that time.
I feel you, but I listener, if that's where you are, please tweet me, and I will do my very best to recommend books that will serve the same purpose that I think are better books than this.
Well, speaking of which,
I stand ready to serve you, the beloved listener.
Speaking of which, I think it's probably a good idea on the show here to talk about things that aren't bad sometimes too. So is there anything you'd like to recommend to people at home that they should put in their brains as opposed to this?
I mean, it's not related really at all, but like the last book that I got through that I basically enjoyed was called Veronica by Mary Gateskill. It's creepy as shit. It's kind of stream of consciousness and jumps around in time a lot, so it's vaguely related to this. But is wildly different. But I enjoyed it. It's dark. It's mean. It's about unpleasant people. But it's also just a quick and kind of interesting read. And a lot of it takes place in Marin County, just up the road from where we are right now.
Awesome. I'm gonna go completely out of left field here because I haven't had a lot of time to read lately. So I'm just gonna recommend a movie I saw yesterday, and we can pretend this is one of those podcasts. It's called It Follows. It was a really cool horror movie. I think in a lot of ways it was more of a suspense movie than a horror movie, but it really it did a lot with the genre that was surprising. And while there were a couple gory parts, I would say that like generally it's a movie that does a lot without a ton of overtly shocking material. The soundtrack though is what really got me. It's very John Carpenter-y, like. And it's
you'll pardon me. I have to go to the theater right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, see this before it's out of the theater because even if the narrative doesn't click with you, I really dug it. I thought it was great. There's a lot of kind of nostalgia-filled stuff that doesn't feel pandery at all. It's just a movie that kind of ignores the existence of adults entirely in a way that was really cool. But yeah, see it in a theater because the soundtrack is amazing. A lot of it is just about kind of these like low frequency bass synth responses and a
Nice.
lot of tension built up with the music. And I don't think you're going to get the same effect at home unless you have a killer sound system. So I would recommend seeing that. Just be forewarned. Yeah, it is. There's a little bit of gore in it, and it definitely deals pretty heavily with the quote unquote adult situations. And don't read anything about it before you go see it. I didn't know anything about it other than my friend said it was good and it was awesome. But now I'm done plugging movies on a book podcast. So I just wanted to let you guys all know to write in emails to idon'tevenownatelevision@gmail.com. We're going to start being a lot more interactive about this because Chris has been a huge factor in championing this. So we're going to be better about that because I won't be the only one doing it.
Yeah, email whatever. I love email. I live on email. Really looking forward to reading what you, the listener, have to say.
And also, as always, you can find the latest episodes on idon'tevenownatelevision.com or iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast provider is. Get in touch. It's IDEOTVpod at twitter.com. On Twitter, I'm Satellite High.
I am at CF Collision.
That's true. I am at Satellite High. I forgot that. I haven't done that. So, yeah, talk to us too. And we'll be back shortly with more bad things to discuss. So please stick around next time. And until then, keep reading crap. Later.
Later.
All right. Well, here's a little song I wrote about Wayward Pines. Once upon a time, there was an FBI guy named Ethan. And he looked handsome as fuck. Woke up in a weird town with amnesia, feeling pretty down on his luck. And then he got stuck by a syringe full of drugs by a nurse that looked like Joan. And he saw his wife and he saw his kid, but he ended up sleeping alone. Whoa, pines, pines, wayward fucking pines, blocking up the scenery, fucking with my mind. Town is crazy, it's fucking wayward pines. Oh man, I forgot the chords. It's fucking crazy. How was that?